He's trying to break into my house." Vivian Baxter stormed onto my porch waving a so-called universal key she ordered online, yelling that it could unlock every home in the neighborhood. The glowing green toy didn't even come close to fitting my lock, yet she still called 911, claiming I'd threatened her. But what she didn't realize, the person on the other end of that call wasn't just any dispatcher, and what happened next shattered her entire whole reign in a single phone call. Drop a comment where you're watching from this revenge. It's flawless. That evening started like most Tuesdays at our humble two-story on Maple Street. My son Dylan and I were halfway through some greasy takeout, the kind with sweet and sour sauce packets that always rip the wrong way. He was home from his shift, and we were just catching up when something slid under the door. Not subtly either. A loud scrape, a bright yellow envelope. It screamed trouble before I even picked it up. It was a notice from the HOA, a $500 fine for a fence violation. Apparently, our wooden fence was 3 inches taller than allowed under subsection 12B of the Fairview Heights guidelines. I crumpled it with a curse and tossed it on the counter. Dylan just shook his head and stabbed his orange chicken like it personally offended him. Then came the banging. Not a knock, no. It was fist slamming into the door like someone meant to break it down. I glanced through the peephole and there she was, Vivian Baxter, in full HOA regalia. Oversized designer shades even though the sun was setting. A sparkly handbag that probably cost more than my mortgage, and that obnoxious neon green key twirling in her fingers like it held power. She wore what I can only call suburban battle armor, a stiff blazer, heels that could double as weapons, and hair sprayed into an unyielding platinum helmet. "Open up, Ryan Caldwell!" she shrieked. Her voice carried down the entire block. "I have the master key for 90% of homes in this development, and I'm not afraid to use it." I cracked the door just enough to block her entry with my body. "Evening, Vivian. What brings you by besides your usual power trip?" Behind me, Dylan went silent. I could feel him lingering nearby, likely recording the moment like the smart kid he is. Vivian shoved the key forward like it was some kind of holy relic. The thing was glowing green, looked like a Halloween prop or maybe a leftover from some energy drink promotion. "This," she announced, like she was unveiling a scientific breakthrough, "is a universal master key. I got it from a very credible online security company. It can open any standard lock. And since you ignored my warning about your fence, I'm here to inspect your property for more violations." It would have been funny if it wasn't so absurd. I leaned against the door frame and crossed my arms. "Fascinating, Vivian. Did this a credible site also sell you beachfront property in Kansas? Because that thing looks like it came out of a dollar store glow stick kit." Her face flushed beneath the foundation. She actually tried jamming the key into my lock. It didn't fit it too wide. "Wrong shape." She wiggled in like that would help, muttering about bad reviews and defective junk. "Ma'am, you need to leave," I said, steady but firm. "You have no authority to enter this house. I don't care what kind of toy key you brought." That's when she yanked out her phone with the flair of a magician. "We'll see about that. I'm calling the cops. You're threatening me. This is harassment. I am the HOA president. You're obstructing official business." She dramatically punched in the numbers like she was starring in a courtroom drama. Behind me, Dylan's phone buzzed. I heard him slip away toward his room. Thought nothing of it. Figured he just wanted to avoid the mess. 911. "What's your emergency?" came a calm voice through her speaker. Vivian launched into her rant, full of fake hysteria. "Yes, this is Vivian Baxter, president of the Fairview Heights HOA. I'm at 47 Maple Street, and the homeowner, Ryan Caldwell, is threatening me. He won't let me perform my lawful duty. Yes, I need officers immediately." I stayed quiet. No point feeding the fire. What I didn't know, just a few blocks away, at the emergency dispatch center, my son Dylan was listening, a grinning ear to ear. The dispatcher's response? Let's just say it wasn't what Vivian expected. "Ma'am, can you describe the nature of the threat? Are you in immediate danger?" Vivian stumbled. She hadn't expected to be challenged. "Well, has a broken bar." He's standing there, looking aggressive. "And he called my master key fake." There was a pause. "Ma'am, did you say a master key? Can you tell me more about that? Is it registered with the National Locksmith Guild?" I had to bite my tongue not to laugh. Vivian's face cycled through confusion, then indignation, and finally, full-on panic. When a broken bar? No, it's from masterkeysdirect.com. They said it works everywhere. Another pause. Ma'am, we'll need the model and manufacturer for our report. There've been recent cases of counterfeit lock tools sold online. Vivian dropped her bag. Its contents exploded across the porch. Lipsticks, receipts, at least 3 citation pads from the HOA. I don't know the make or model. It's just a key. A master key. That's what the website said. She was now stomping furiously. Her heels clacked against the concrete like castanets in a flamenco rage. And slowly but surely, more neighbors started peeking out from their home as a broken bar, behind curtains and cracked doors. I noticed neighbors peeking out. Drapes shifted, faces appeared behind windows. Everyone was curious to see Vivian's latest crusade up close. The woman herself didn't even seem to notice the growing crowd, too locked into her argument with the dispatcher about the authenticity of her neon-colored master key. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Dylan. "Got this, Dad," and that's when it clicked. My sharp, occasionally mischievous son was the one fielding this 911 caller right from his dispatch desk. For a second, I thought about asking him to hand the call off to avoid any conflict of interest, but the part of me that had spent the last 2 years enduring Vivian's reign over the neighborhood and the overreach, the fines, the passive-aggressive newsletters wanted to watch this unfold. Vivian began pacing in front of the house, waving her hands dramatically, trying to convince the dispatcher that she absolutely needed to get inside right now. Her voice echoed through the neighborhood. "This is about community standards, property values, the integrity of Fairview Heights." Then came the distant sound of sirens. Vivian stopped mid-step, her eyes lit up with triumph. Slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small camera. She placed it carefully on a nearby planter, angled toward the porch, toward me broken bar and toward the flashing red and blue lights approaching down the street. Whatever she had planned, it was clear this ridiculous master key fiasco was only the beginning. The question now, what exactly was she trying to stage with that camera, and how was I supposed to protect myself and Dylan from her next act? Officer Greg Turner stepped out of the cruiser, wearing the kind of exhausted look you only see on people who've dealt with Vivian one too many times. Gray streaked the sides of his hair, and the lines on his face deepened when he saw her standing there, camera ready, eyes dry but clutching a lace handkerchief like she was mourning a national tragedy. I recognized Turner from previous neighborhood flare-ups. He'd always been reasonable, but tonight, a broken bar, something felt off. Vivian wasted no time slipping into her classic victim routine. "Officer Turner, thank goodness!" she cried, dabbing at invisible tears. "This morning," she pointed at me with a trembling finger that might have been convincing if I hadn't seen the exact same performance at 3 different home meetings. "A has been tormenting me. Look at what he's done to this neighborhood." She whipped out her phone like a duelist drawing a pistol and shoved it toward him. On the screen was a house surrounded by a neon pink fence so bright it could give you a headache from across the street. The catch? She claimed it was my house, but the house number was wrong. The layout was different, the windows didn't match, and I was pretty sure my old maple hadn't magically transformed into a palm tree overnight. Still, in the low lighting, just the porch bulbs and street lamps, Officer Turner squinted at the photo, his brow beginning to furrow. He looked back and forth between the image and my very normal, very brown fence. I saw him trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Mr. Caldwell," Turner said in a deliberately even tone, "I'm going to need your side of things. Mrs. Baxter claims you've committed several HOA violations, a broken bar, and that you threatened her when she came to address them." Behind him, Vivian clung to her act, clutching the handkerchief, teetering slightly like she might faint. Her camera was still recording, its red light blinking like a warning signal. I took a long breath, jaw clenched to stay calm. "Officer, I've lived at this address for 15 years. The photo she just showed you, it's been doctored. Look at the house number, it says 53. I live at 47, and unless Ohio suddenly got palm trees, I'm pretty sure that's not my yard." Turner's frown deepened. He lifted Vivian's phone under the street light for a clearer look. By now, more neighbors had come outside. I saw Henry Walsh 2 doors down leaning against his fence, his expression hard as stone as he watched Vivian's performance. Sofia Alvarez stood on her porch with her daughter, both of them shaking their heads in quiet disbelief. The whole street was watching. And Vivian? She seemed to be thriving in the attention. "Officer," she called out, raising her voice for the gathered crowd. "Mr. Caldwell has been a problem from day one. Ever since he publicly challenged my authority at the last home meeting. He questioned our fence policy in front of every Indian, undermining the rules we all agreed to. He's no better than the last man who lived in that house. He always stirring trouble, always refusing to follow basic community standards." Something clicked in my memory. 2 years ago, Vivian had gone head-to-head with the previous homeowner, an older gentleman named Frank Morrison. He'd fought her on every arbitrary rule she tried to enforce. Eventually, Frank moved to Florida, but not before publicly accusing Vivian of misusing HOA funds at a crowded community meeting. She'd been humiliated, and now, she was projecting all that old resentment onto me. I pulled out my phone and texted Dylan, "Need HOA bylaws ASAP. She's trying to force her way in." Officer Turner gave Vivian a tight nod. "Mrs. Baxter," he said, working hard to stay neutral, "I'm going to need to verify this photo. The details don't seem to match what I'm seeing here." Vivian's crocodile tears suddenly became more a broken bar theatrical. She sniffled louder, her voice cracked deliberately. "And the show continued. Are you accusing me of lying, officer?" Vivian snapped, eyes wide with false outrage. "I'm simply trying to uphold standards in this neighborhood. Do you have any idea what happens to property values when people like him?" She flailed a hand in my direction. "They are allowed to break the rules unchecked?" "This is exactly what Frank Morrison did," she continued, voice rising. "He questioned every rule, painted me as the villain, all while I was the only one trying to preserve the beauty of this community." My phone buzzed. A new message from Dylan, attached, a PDF of the HOA bylaws. I scrolled quickly, zeroing in on what I needed. "Officer Turner," I said, holding out my phone, "please allow me to read Section 8, subsection C of our HOA guidelines. And no HOA board member shall enter a resident's property without written permission or court order. Violating this policy may lead to criminal trespass charges." I locked eyes with Vivian. She knows this. She helped write these rules. The effect was immediate. Vivian's handkerchief wrung tighter in her hands, and a deep flush crept across her cheeks. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish pulled out of water. Turner took my phone, read the text himself, then looked to Vivian with raised brows. "Ma'am, were you aware of this bylaw?" Her composure slipped. That's not a broken bar. He's twisting it. "That's not what it means," she stammered. "I have a master key. I'm allowed to inspect homes for violations." Turner's expression turned colder. "Mrs. Baxter, I am not your private enforcer. If Mr. Caldwell is in violation, there's a process." "Barging into his home with some key you bought online, isn't it?" A wave of murmur spread through the crowd of neighbors. I caught snippets of their whispers. "Didn't she try the same thing with the Johnsons? She's completely out of control. Poor Rihanna, he doesn't deserve this." Then Henry Walsh, from 2 houses down, spoke up, his rough voice cutting through the noise. "Hey Turner, while I've got you here, you should probably know Vivian slapped me with a $200 fine today, said I was supporting a known violator." He shook his head. "All I did was wave at Ryan this morning." "That seemed legal to you?" Turner's jaw tightened as he slowly turned back toward Vivian, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Ma'am," he said sternly, "I think it's time you head home. If you have valid complaints, submit them through official channels. And that photo you showed me," he handed her the phone, "you might want to think twice about presenting potentially doctored evidence. That's not something we take lightly." Just then, Vivian's phone lit up. She glanced down at the screen, and her face paled as she read the message. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing frantically. I heard her muttering something about eviction notices and legal action before sunrise. With unsteady hands, she began collecting her things, shoving lipstick tubes and citation pads back into her designer bag in a flurry. The last thing she picked up was her camera. She made a show of checking that it had recorded the entire scene. As Officer Turner gave me a nod and reminded me to call if any more trouble arose, Vivian stood beside her ridiculous luxury SUV, glaring at me with open contempt. "This isn't over," Caldwell, she hissed, making sure everyone nearby could hear. You think you are clever with your bylaws and that smug little attitude, yeah, but I know things that'll have this whole block turning on you. By tomorrow morning, you'll be begging me to let you leave quietly. She climbed into the SUV and slammed the door with a force that rattled the windows. Her taillights vanished down the street, but her words lingered in the air like smoke. I stood there, hands still clenched, wondering what ammunition she thought she had and just how far she was willing to go to preserve her wounded pride. I had a feeling I wouldn't have to wait long to find out. The next morning arrived strangely quiet, eerily so. At around 9, I made my way over to Sofia Alvarez's house, coffee in hand as a peace offering. I felt bad about the chaos from the night before. She opened the door, her 8-year-old daughter Maria clinging to her leg, both of them still in their pajamas. Her expression softened when she saw me. Ryan, come in. I was just about to call you. After last night's HOA theater performance, a broken bar. Her living room felt like home, warm and chaotic. Toys scattered across the carpet, medical textbooks piled on the coffee table. Life in full swing. Sofia balanced single motherhood and her job as an nurse with grace I could never fully comprehend. As Maria skipped off toward her room, Sofia's demeanor shifted. She curled up on the couch, arms around her neck, more closed off than I'd ever seen her. There's something I need to tell you, Ryan, she said quietly. 3 months ago, Vivian stood up at the home meeting and publicly berated me, for 20 minutes, about my mailbox. She paused, voice trembling. She said it was half an inch too close to the sidewalk, and the numbers weren't in the approved font. She held up pictures, made me stand there like I'd committed a crime in front of the entire board. Her voice cracked, and when Maria wandered back into the room, Sofia pulled her close and hugged her tight. I haven't slept well since. Every time I hear a car door, I think it's Hero coming to find something new to cite me for. Maria keeps asking why mommy is always so nervous. The weight of her confession hit me harder than I expected. Sofia was one of the strongest, most grounded people I knew. 12-hour shifts in the raising her daughter alone after her husband disappeared into gambling debts. And even she was cracking under Vivian's grip. If Vivian had managed to rattle someone as strong as Sofia, it made me wonder how many others in the neighborhood were quietly suffering under her rule. Sofia must have read my expression. But here's the thing, Ryan, she said, straightening up a bit. I didn't just roll over and take it. She reached for her laptop and began typing with practiced ease. Remember I told you I'd been picking up some tech skills? Well, a broken bar after my ex tried to hide assets during our divorce. I taught myself how to do basic digital digging, all legal, just public records, online payments, social media. She clicked a few times, and the screen filled with screenshots. There were images of Vivian's various online accounts, including a list of what looked like Venmo transactions. Check this out, Sofia said, pointing at a string of payments. Every month, she makes transfers labeled a HOA Beautification Fund, then the next day, purchases at luxury retailers, designer handbags, spa treatments, boutique wine deliveries. It's not adding up. She pulled up another tab. These emails came from an old data breach I found archived online. She's been exchanging messages with the HOA treasurer talking about something called Project Clean Sweep. And look here, broken bar. Sofia scrolled down and highlighted a line. She mentioned you by name, said, Ryan Caldwell is polluting the community culture, just like Frank Morrison did. My stomach turned. This wasn't about a 3-inch fence. This was targeted harassment, coordinated, with money behind it. Before I could even respond, there was a knock at the door. Sofia glanced at the people and gave a knowing smile. Speaking of backup, here comes the cavalry. She opened the door to reveal Henry Walsh, red-faced and fuming like a man pushed too far. That woman, he thundered, stomping inside without a greeting. She fined me $500 for my tree. Sofia and I blinked. Henry yanked a wrinkled paper from his pocket, his large hands shaking. Today marks 5 years since my Elizabeth passed, he said, voice rough. I planted that oak tree for her, mixed her ashes into the roots. There's a small plaque beneath it. And Vivian sent me this. He held up the violation, for unauthorized memorial landscaping. Today of all days, his eyes were shining now. This man, who once lifted car engines barehanded, looked like he might break from grief and fury combined. "I'm done being polite," he growled. "Whatever the two of you are planning, I'm in, and I'm not the only one. The Martins, the Thompsons, the Petersons, we've all had enough of her dictatorship." He pulled out his phone and showed us a flurry of messages in a neighborhood group chat. "Started this thread last night after she pulled that stunt. You wouldn't believe the stories people are sharing." We gathered around the screen, scrolling through post after post. Vivian had fined someone for painting their house trim the wrong shade of white, tried to force old Mrs. Patterson to remove her wheelchair ramp because it wasn't pre-approved, even attempted to implement a rule banning children from playing in their own yards during certain hours. "This has to be done right," Sophia said, already slipping into strategy mode. "We need a coordinated response." "Ryan, she's going to report you again. It's her pattern as she escalates." "And Henry, after what you just said, you're likely next on her list." As if on cue, distant sirens began to wail. Sophia whipped open her HOA portal. "There," she said, pointing at an email timestamped in the early hours of the morning. She sent this to the board just before 2 a.m.A. A proposal for an emergency assessment, $1,000 per household, supposedly to cover legal expenses related to covenant enforcement. She clicked an attachment. A spreadsheet opened. My stomach dropped. At the top of the list, priority enforcement targets. Next to my name, a note: use funds to pursue legal action. The sirens were closer now. Through Sophia's front window, we could see the patrol car turning onto our street. Henry let out a breath through his nose. "That one's for you," he muttered. "She's cooked up another complaint." Sophia was already grabbing her tablet. "I'm getting video of whatever happens next." "Ryan, call your son, we might need backup." I was ahead of her, already texting Dylan. His reply came within seconds. "Saw the call come through, same number. She's claiming you're disturbing the peace by plotting against her. I've got it covered." I took a deep breath and stepped outside to face whatever storm Vivian had summoned this time. Behind me, I heard Henry's voice, low and raw. That tree meant everything to Elizabeth. She always wanted one like it in our yard, as something she could see from her bed while she was in hospice. He paused, voice hardening. "Vivian knows that." She knew, and she fined me anyway, on this day. Then, with a quiet, iron resolve, "This ends here, whatever it takes." A neighbor's security camera caught the image perfectly, the three of us standing on Sophia's porch, side by side, ready to push back against Vivian's unchecked power. What none of us knew then was that this footage would later become crucial evidence. But for now, I had a bigger problem to deal with, another fabricated accusation, and judging by the grim look on the approaching officer's face, a broken bar, this one was going to be worse than a photoshopped fence. Vivian's voice was already cutting through the morning air like a siren. From across the street, Vivian was at it again, glued to her phone, her voice shrill enough to pierce through the distance. "Yes, I'm reporting a coordinated conspiracy. They're trying to undermine my authority. This is blatant harassment against an elected HOA official." A message from Dylan lit up my phone. "She's really losing it. Says you're inciting a riot." Should I pull up the dictionary definition for her? Despite everything, I couldn't help but smirk. My son was playing this perfectly, turning Vivian's own dramatic flair into a weapon against her. But my amusement faded as the officer approached, papers in hand. This was escalating much quicker than any of us had expected, and Vivian had clearly dug in her heels. She wasn't backing down. Sophia gave my shoulder a firm squeeze. "Don't forget," she whispered, "we've got the proof now. She's not the only one who can keep records." Behind us, Henry was already dialing numbers, calling neighbors to arms. Sides were being chosen, and for the first time, I actually felt like we had a shot. The only question now was whether we could expose Vivian's corruption before she tore down what was left of my reputation, a broken bar or anyone else's. As I stepped into the driveway to meet the officer, I spotted Vivian peeking from behind her curtains. No doubt her surveillance cameras were recording every second. Let her watch, I thought. She had no idea what was coming. The Fairview Heights Community Center had never hosted such a turnout for an emergency home meeting. Every chair was occupied. with people pressed up along the walls like they were waiting for a heavyweight title match. The air practically crackled with anticipation. At the center of it all stood Vivian Baxter, clutching a remote like it was a royal scepter. She was dressed for badly tailored blazer, sharp heels, hair lacquered into a helmet that hadn't moved since 1996. The large screen behind her flickered on. My heart dropped. There, in low-res graininess, was footage of someone who looked like me spray painting a fence in the loudest, most offensive shade of neon pink imaginable. It was obvious the footage was taken from a distance, the details hazy, but in the dim light of the room, it looked damning. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivian began, voice oozing phony concern. "This is what Ryan Caldwell does when no one's watching. This is the man parading around as a respectable member of our neighborhood." A wave of murmur swept through the crowd. I saw several neighbors exchanging troubled looks. Through the windows, chants were echoing outside. I turned just in time to see a group of residents, maybe 20 strong, picketing in front of my house. One sign read, "Evict the vandal." Another declared, "Save our property values." Someone had even crafted a massive banner of my face with a red X slashed over it. It felt like a scene from a satirical film about suburban warfare. Sophia rose beside me, tablet in hand like a weapon of truth. "I'd like to offer a rebuttal," she said, her voice cutting cleanly through the noise. The screen blinked again as she mirrored her device. This time, the audience was met with a far less theatrical but far more devastating display. Vivian's own emails. On the screen were threads detailing unauthorized discretionary spending from the HOA's beautification fund, complete with receipts for high-end handbags and boutique shopping sprees, all charged to the community's account. But the worst came next. Sophia read aloud, "One itemized purchase $799 for a universal access device, which turned out to be nothing more than a glorified keychain." Gasps rippled through the room. There was a loud clatter as Vivian's clipboard dropped from her hand, smacking the floor. Henry stood up next, face flushed with fury. "While we're laying everything out," he growled, "let's talk about the security footage from Tuesday." The projection changed again. This time, crystal clear video from a Ring camera, showing Vivian sneaking into the HOA office in the dead of night, arms full of files. Henry folded his arms. "What were you doing there, Vivian? Filing paperwork during a full moon?" The crowd was turning. Phones came out. People were recording. And then it happened. Vivian cracked. Her face went from pale to flushed to beet red, and she slammed her palm down on the podium, hard enough to screech the microphone. "You don't get it," she barked, the last shreds of composure flying out the window. "I did all of this for you. Do you know what happens when neighborhoods don't have strong leadership? They crumble. Property values nosedive. Riffraff moves in." She was pacing now, unraveling like a live wire. "That money wasn't stolen, it was invested. I used it to maintain standards. That key was meant to protect this community from people like him," she snapped, finger shaking as it pointed straight at me. "He's no different than Frank Morrison, always challenging, always meddling." Then, her voice sharp and raw, "Well, not this time. I won't be disrespected by some no-name electrician who thinks he knows better than me." The meltdown was both chaotic and strangely mesmerizing. Vivian lunged to grab her clipboard from the floor again and pounded it against the podium. Papers flew like confetti, raining down in a flurry of desperation. "I've given everything to this neighborhood. My time, my energy, my reputation. And this is how you all repay me, by siding with him?" Somewhere in the back, a neighbor was live-streaming the whole scene. I could already imagine the caption, "HOA Queen loses idol live from Fairview Heights." Vivian's carefully constructed image was collapsing right there in front of USA, and she couldn't stop it. Vivian shrieked, her voice cracking under the weight of her unraveling composure. "You think you'll be fine without me? Just till you'll all be crawling back when property values crash and criminals take over your streets." I rose from my seat, slow and deliberate, letting the gravity of the moment settle before I spoke. "The only thing you've ever managed, Vivian, is disorder," I said, voice steady. "You've turned neighbors into enemies, twisted minor rules into weapons, and stolen from the very people you claimed to serve. The only criminal here is you." The crowd exploded. Some were shouting in support, others booed Vivian outright. Then Henry stood up and began chanting, Resign, resign." The chant caught like wildfire, spreading through the room. But as the chaos intensified, my eyes caught something unsettling. Patricia, the timid HOA treasurer who always seemed to follow Vivian like a shadow, was quietly slipping out the side door. She clutched a laptop bag tightly against her chest. Vivian must have noticed it too, because she abruptly stopped her rant and whipped out her phone. Even from across the room, I could see her hands trembling as she typed furiously. "This isn't over," she suddenly shouted over the uproar. "By tomorrow, Ryan Caldwell will be exposed for what he really is. I have connections or resources you can't even imagine. People who owe me favors. You've made a huge mistake." She grabbed her designer purse and stormed toward the exit, but not before the neighbor who had been live streaming managed to capture a crystal clear close-up of her smeared makeup and frenzied expression, at the perfect thumbnail for what was bound to become the most viewed video in Fairview Heights history. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, board members scrambling to restore order, neighbors shouting over one another, Sophia grabbed my arm. "Patricia," she said urgently, "we have to find out what she's up to. That woman has been Vivian's accomplice in all of this." Henry appeared on my other side, still buzzing from the confrontation. "Let them try whatever they want," he growled. "After tonight, no one's going to believe a single word Vivian says." But I wasn't so sure. People who lose everything become unpredictable, and Vivian had just watched her entire house of cards collapse in front of the entire neighborhood. As we stepped outside the community center, my phone buzzed with a message from Dylan. "Dad, you need to see this. Vivian just called someone about using the nuclear option." I stopped in my tracks. "The nuclear option?" I glanced back at the building, where residents still lingered, discussing what they'd just witnessed. No. This wasn't over. If anything, Vivian's spectacular public breakdown had only made her more dangerous. She had nothing left to lose, and that made her capable of anything. The next morning came crashing in like a thunderstorm. My phone lit up before the sun even rose, and not with texts or social alerts, but something far more ominous, an emergency HOA broadcast, pushed out to every single resident through email, text, and even the long-forgotten community app. Patricia's nasally voice filled my bedroom, echoing from multiple devices at once. "Attention Fairview Heights residents, this is a critical security announcement. Ryan Caldwell, residing at 47 Maple Street, has been deemed a serious threat to neighborhood safety and property values. Evidence has emerged of vandalism, aggressive conduct, and financial misconduct. An emergency assessment of $15,000 per household is now mandatory to pursue immediate legal action and protect our community. Failure to pay within 24 hours will result in automatic lien enforcement proceedings." I shot upright, stunned by the audacity of it. $15,000 per household. They might as well have asked for everyone's life savings. Most families here were living month to month. This wasn't just a personal attack, it was financial blackmail, dressed up as community protection. Before I could even reach for my phone, another message came through, this one from Dylan. "Dad, I'm seeing multiple 911 calls about that broadcast. People are panicking. Also, Vivian just reported you again for harassment." "Want me to send the recording I saved?" I stared at the screen, momentarily speechless at my son's foresight. From his dispatcher job, he'd been quietly documenting everything, creating a full audio trail of Vivian's spiraling behavior. Just then, Sophia burst into my doorway, still wearing her scrubs from her night shift, but very much awake and furious. "You saw it, right?" she asked, holding out her phone with the broadcast message. But then she added, almost triumphantly, "Here's the part one didn't tell you yet. Remember that mysterious text Vivian got during the first police visit? The one that made her freeze?" I nodded. "That was me," she said, with a grin that belonged on a battlefield. I set up a burner phone and sent her a message hinting that I knew about the embezzlement. I just wanted to see what she'd do. She laughed under her breath. And wow! She took the bait. Everything was starting to make sense. Vivian's collapse hadn't been just about control, it was about fear. She was terrified the truth would finally come out. And it was beginning to look like the truth had been right under our noses the entire time. Vivian was panicking, grabbing at whatever money she could before her carefully built empire collapsed around her. Henry showed up next, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Ryan, a broken bar, they cut my power," he said, voice trembling with fury. "I went to make coffee this morning, and nothing worked. Called the utility company, they said the HOA placed a stop order for unpaid fees I've never even heard of. This was new. HOAs typically had authority, but cutting off someone's utilities? That was no longer just irritating. It was borderline criminal." I reached for my phone to call Dylan again, but the screen instantly went black. My own power had just been shut off. In the sudden silence, without even the refrigerator humming, we could hear approaching sirens. "She's lost it completely," Sophia muttered, pulling out her tablet. "But she's getting sloppy. Look at Thesa, she's calling 911 from the community center parking lot. I can see her SUV on the traffic cam." And there it was, Vivian's ridiculous vehicle, parked crookedly across two spots, while she gestured wildly inside. Dylan's voice came through Sophia's table. He had looped us into Vivian's latest emergency call. "Ma'am," he said in his calm dispatcher tone, "you are reporting harassment, but our GPS data shows you are not at your residence. Can you explain why you're calling from the community center parking lot?" Vivian's reply was a high-pitched shriek that made all of us wince. "I don't have to explain anything. Ryan Caldwell is ruining this entire neighborhood. Everyone's turned on me because of him. I demand immediate action." Then something amazing happened. Dylana, my incredible Sona, started playing back her previous 911 calls. Her voice echoed through the speaker, layered over itself, past and present Vivian clashing in real time. "I need units at Henry Walsh's home immediately. His memorial tree violates code. Sophia Alvarez is fostering anti-HOA behavior. She needs to be monitored. The Thompson kids were playing outside at 4:15 p.m. This is highly concerning." Call after call painted the same picture. Vivian had been using the emergency system as her personal tool of intimidation for months. On the line, current Vivian fell completely silent. She realized she was being exposed by her own words. Just then, the lights flickered back on, and my phone immediately rang. Officer Turner was on the line, and he sounded worn out. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm here in the parking lot with Mrs. Baxter. She's admitted to ordering the power shut off. She claims it was necessary to preserve order. We've got state officials on the way now. This has gone way past anything we can handle locally." Outside my window, neighbors were stepping out of their homes, confused and angry about the sudden blackout. A few had already started walking toward the community center, drawn by the flashing lights and the spectacle Vivian had created. Turner continued, "That emergency broadcast earlier, it set off alarm bells. The state's HOA fraud hotline got flooded over 50 calls in under an hour. Let's just say they're now very interested in Mrs. Baxter, broken bar, and her treasurer." Dylan's voice came back over Sophia's device, and for the first time, the professional calm in his dispatcher voice wavered. Broken bar, I need to tell you something. I've been keeping records. Every call, every threat she made, every time she misused the system. I didn't tell you because he broken bar. I wanted to handle it myself. I wanted to prove I could do something real with this job. But when she came after you, a broken bar, his voice cracked. A broken bar, I couldn't just sit and watch her tear everything apart. My throat tightened. My Sona, just 19 years old, had been quietly shielding not just me, but the entire community. From behind his dispatch console, "Dylan," I said, my voice heavy with emotion, "you have nothing to be sorry for. You're the hero in all of this. You saved us." I could hear him sniffle. Then, his usual calm returned. "Copy that, Dad." "Oh, and Vivian's trying to call again. Want me to patch her through?" We could all hear Vivian in the background, yelling to speak to a supervisor, claiming the entire dispatch center was part of a conspiracy against her. Officer Turner's dry tone cut in. "Ma'am, accusing 911 dispatchers of conspiracy is a serious charge. Would you like to officially add that to your growing list of complaints?" The sound of her coffee cup dropping and shattering was somehow audible even from inside my house. Back in the kitchen, the three of us stood together, tired, overwhelmed, but oddly energized. Sophia's tablet buzzed again with a new notification. "It's from the HOA board," she said, scanning the message. "They've suspended Vivian and Patricia pending investigation. All HOA accounts have been frozen, and the $15,000 assessment has been canceled." For the first time in days, Henry cracked a smile. Good, but she's not done yet. People like Vivian, they always have one last play. Almost as if on cue, Dylan's voice came through once more. Broken bar. Vivian just said something about having dirt on you, something about your work history. She's planning to expose you at tonight's emergency meeting. I felt a chill run through me. There wasn't anything remotely scandalous in my work history, but Vivian had already shown she wasn't above fabricating lies. I couldn't even imagine what kind of story she was planning to spin next. The real question was, after everything that had unfolded, would anyone still believe her? That night's emergency meeting was complete chaos even before it officially started. The fallout from Vivian's morning broadcast and the bizarre blackout had spread through Fairview Heights like wildfire. Practically every single resident showed up, but this wasn't just a community dispute anymore. Outside the community center, a local news van was parked, and a perfectly polished reporter was already interviewing frustrated neighbors. The presence of the media changed everything. This wasn't just our neighborhood scandal now. Vivian's meltdown was about to go public. I arrived flanked by Sophia and Henry like we were walking into a battlefield. The crowd was so thick, we had to squeeze our way through just to get to the door. Inside, things were even more tense. Officer Turner stood at the front, flanked by two state investigators whose shiny badges gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Vivian sat at the board table, but the power she usually exuded was gone. The other board members had physically distanced themselves from her, leaving her isolated at one end like someone awaiting sentencing in a courtroom. She was clutching the obnoxious neon green HOA key, fidgeting with it in her hands like it held magical powers. The moment her eyes met mine, her face twisted in fury, but underneath it, I could see fear. Notably missing was Patricia, the treasurer. Rumor was, she'd already been picked up for questioning about the HOA's questionable finances. Before anything began, Officer Turner raised his voice to address the restless crowd. Everyone should be aware this meeting is being recorded as part of an active investigation into misuse of emergency services and possible fraud. Somehow, the reporter from outside had slipped in and was setting up her camera discreetly in the corner. Vivian jumped to her feet and pointed furiously. "No media. This is a private home meeting." The reporter, composed and unbothered, replied calmly, "Actually, ma'am, the moment you broadcast a demand for $15,000 from every household, you made this a public matter. Would you care to respond to the embezzlement allegations?" The room froze. It was like someone had tossed a live grenade in the middle of a tennis match. Vivian opened her mouth several times before she managed to speak. "I don't have to answer to you. This is about Ryan Caldwell and his criminal behavior. I have proof that he's been doing shady electrical work, overcharging people and hiding behind his son's dispatcher job to avoid accountability." The claim was so ridiculous that laughter broke out from multiple corners of the room. Mrs. Thompson stood up, her voice calm but firm. "Ryan rewired our whole house last year and only charged for materials. He even gave us a discount because my husband had just lost his job. He's the most honest person we know." That's when I played my trump card. "Well, if we're talking evidence," a broken bar, I said, pulling out my phone. "I think everyone should hear this." Sophia's recording from earlier that morning echoed through the hall. Vivian's voice, filled with venom, was crystal clear. She admitted to the power shutoffs, ranted about her broadcast, and threatened anyone who dared to oppose her. Then came the real blow. Dylan's voice joined the playback, rolling through her previous 911 calls, every one of them more petty and malicious than the last. In one call, she sneered, building a case. "These people need to learn their place." Sophia stood next, her tablet connected to the projector. "I'd like to make something very clear," she said sharply. "Vivian Baxter has called 911 47 times in the last 6 months, and not a single one was for a legitimate emergency." The screen displayed a stream of call logs, each time-stamped and color-coded. The pattern was obvious. Henry had been targeted 5 times, the Thompsons 7, even poor Mrs. Patterson, in a wheelchair, had 3 calls logged against her. "You're a liar, Vivian, and we've had enough." Sophia's voice cracked through the air like a whip. The room erupted in murmurs and nods of agreement. That's when Henry slowly stood up. For a second, Vivian actually looked nervous, but all he pulled from his jacket was a worn photograph creased at the edges from years of handling. It showed a smiling woman beside a small oak tree. "This," he said gently, "is my Elizabeth. She passed away 5 years ago today. That tree in my yard, she asked me to plant it so she could look at something beautiful from her hospice bed." He turned to face Vivian, eyes burning. "And on our anniversary, you fined me $500 for it. You knew what that tree meant, and you fined me anyway." The entire room went quiet, save for the faint whir of the news camera. Then Henry reached into his coat again and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "But you made a mistake, Vivian. You went after good people, and good people fight back." He opened the folder and held up page after page. 237 signatures. "Vivian, that's 94% of the HOA. We're not just asking for your resignation, we're insisting on it. This is the voice of everyone you've bullied, fined, and tried to trample beneath your designer heels." The response was thunderous. People stood up, clapping, some even wiping away tears. It felt less like a homeowners meeting and more like witnessing the fall of a petty tyrant. If tyrants wore floral perfume and clutched neon green trinkets. Officer Turner stepped forward, restoring order to the room. "Mrs. Baxter," he said firmly, "you should be aware that the state has officially launched a full investigation into your conduct. Your misuse of emergency services alone carries major consequences. On top of that, we're now dealing with allegations of fraud, tampering with public utilities, and what appears to be several other serious offenses." Vivian's face had lost all color. Her knuckles were white as she gripped her neon key like a lifeline. "Boot to broken bar, I was just protecting the neighborhood," she stammered, "preserving property values. You have no idea what this place was like before I took charge." Turner didn't even blink. "I'm an officer of the law, not your errand boy, Vivian. From everything I've seen, the only thing you've really been protecting is your own bank account." The reporter moved in, microphone extended. "Mrs. Baxter, would you like to comment on claims that you used HOA funds for personal expenses, including what your neighbors are calling a glow stick key?" That was the breaking point. Vivian stood so abruptly that her chair clattered to the floor. She clutched her precious key against her chest like a shield. "You're all ungrateful fools," she shrieked. "I built this neighborhood. Without me, none of you would have anything." She started backing away toward the exit, weaving between cameras and community members. "I'll sue every one of you. I have attorneys, connections. If you think this is the end, you're wrong. I'll be back, and when I am, you'll all be begging." But her grand exit was short-lived. She backed straight into the 2 state investigators stationed by the door. "Mrs. Baxter," one of them said calmly, "we need you to come with us. You have the right to remain silent." The rest of the Miranda warning was lost in Vivian's wild shrieking about conspiracies, betrayal, and injustice as they escorted her out. She still clung desperately to that ridiculous green key. Before she was gone, her eyes locked onto mine. There was rage theory, but also something else, a silent promise. She wasn't done. In her mind, this wasn't over. Whether she'd ever get the chance to act on that threat, though, was another matter entirely. Maybe, just maybe, justice had finally come for the woman who had terrorized Fairview Heights for far too long. After she was taken away, the meeting continued. But now, it felt more like a celebration than official business. The board voted unanimously to cancel all recent fines, return any collected payments, and implement strict oversight policies moving forward. As the crowd began to leave, sharing stories, exchanging contacts, preparing for what would likely become a lengthy legal process, I noticed an envelope wedged under my windshield wiper. My name was written across it in a hand I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The message was short but deeply unsettling, chilling enough to stop me in my tracks. But that's a story for another time. What came after, when we all thought the nightmare was finally over. By the time the final emergency home meeting convened, the parking lot was already overwhelmed. This wasn't about drama anymore, it was about holding someone accountable. I showed up with a usual group, but this time, we weren't alone. Dozens of families had gathered in solidarity, united in one goal. Inside, the scene was different. State investigators now occupied the board table, spreading official paperwork across its surface. Vivian sat separately with a lawyer who looked both exhausted and trapped, checking his watch repeatedly. Her once symbolic neon green key now lay on the table in front of her, no longer a badge of power, but a piece of evidence. Before the meeting could officially begin, Henry stepped forward, clutching a manila folder. "I have something to share," he said. From the folder, he pulled copies of flyers he, Sophia, and Ryan had handed out to every home in the neighborhood. Now, every single household in Fairview Heights knows the truth: the theft, the fake broadcast, the abuse of emergency services. Everything. He raised a thick document, filled with signatures. This petition contains the names of 237 residents demanding not just Vivian's removal, but her criminal prosecution. The crowd stirred a murmuring approval and nodding. Henry touched the breast pocket of his shirt where his wife Elizabeth's photo always stayed close. "This is for you, Elizabeth," he whispered. One of the state officials stood. "Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Now, Mrs. Baxter, you asked for this meeting to present your evidence against Mr. Caldwell. You have 5 minutes." Vivian lurched to her feet so forcefully her water glass tipped over. "Ryan Caldwell is a fraud," she yelled. "I have proof he overcharged Mrs. Williams for electrical work years ago, and his so that useless dispatcher he's been working against me from day one." Her so-called evidence? A few receipts that actually showed Ryan had charged below market rates, and some blurry photos that proved nothing at all. But then something shifted in her expression, a flicker of realization. Something had just dawned on her. "That was your son's voice on those 911 calls," Vivian gasped, pointing the trembling finger at me. "It was him all along. You two planned these. You set me up." Right on cue, Dylan walked into the room in his dispatcher uniform, holding a thick folder. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "I was just doing my job. You're the one who misused the emergency system. I simply made sure everything was recorded." He handed the folder to the state investigator. "This is my official report of 47 false emergency calls, fully documented." As the investigator flipped through the pages, her expression became increasingly stern. Henry couldn't help but add, "It wasn't your glow stick key that opened our eyes, Viviana. You did that all on your own." The room burst into laughter, and that seemed to be the final crack in Vivian's crumbling fall. Section 8. The board then voted unanimously to remove her from her position. The state representative announced she would be fined $20,000 and permanently prohibited from serving on any HOA board within the state. As Officer Turner approached to escort her out, she clutched that neon key like a lifeline. "This isn't the end," she snarled. "I'll appeal. I'll sue all of you." But no one was listening anymore. Her reign of terror had ended. Later that evening, Dylan, Sophia, Henry, and I gathered at my house for an impromptu celebration. The kitchen table was buried under pizza boxes, and the air felt lighter than it had in months. "You know what the best part is?" Henry said with a grin, raising his beer. "That old tree of mine? It's going to outlast her entire legacy here." A few neighbors had approached me about joining the newly reformed HOA board. With some encouragement from Sophia and Henry, I agreed to sit in on the next meeting as an observer. It felt like a true fresh start for Fairview Heights, one built on honesty and mutual trust instead of fear and control. Later, Dylan pulled me aside, and we stepped out onto the back porch. "Dad," he said quietly, "I should have told you about the dispatcher job sooner. I just wanted to prove I could handle something serious on my own." I pulled him into a hug, feeling more proud than I ever had. "You didn't just handle something serious, Suna, you saved this whole neighborhood. You're a hero." He laughed, finally looking like the kid I remembered. "So Broken Bar, does this mean I get out of mowing the lawn this weekend?" We were still chuckling when I noticed an envelope tucked under the doormat. Plain white paper, my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside, just one chilling sentence: "Fairview Heights isn't done with you." But as I looked around at my home, my son, and my friends all safe and smiling, I simply crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. After all, we had already brought down one tyrant. The state official had hinted at a much larger investigation into HOA corruption across Ohio. Maybe Vivian was just the beginning. But for now, we had our neighborhood back. Fairview Heights was finally free. And that anonymous threat? It could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, we celebrated. Tonight, we rebuilt. And if you enjoyed this chapter of chaos, mystery, and justicia, show some love with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to Anadramanest.